Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. There's loads of great things that we're going to talk about. The agenda was also really impressive. You've got a lot of really incredible people here. A bit about us. We're Koto. We're about 70-ish, more or less, designers, strategists, and writers. We were originally from London and have expanded to Los Angeles and Berlin, and this obviously gave us a lot of opportunities to work with many talented people. We were founded in 2015, so it's been 6 years and a half, nearly 7 years, and we are quite lucky to have worked with hundreds of partners in the last 6 years. All sizes in all sectors, and we have worked with the biggest brands in the world. We have rebranded Venmo, and we have done the same thing with Discord, and we have amazing relationship with Netflix and Airbnb and Sonos, and have also obviously rebranded Uber Eats. But the great thing about Koto is that diversity of clients, like I said, all sectors at all sizes. And so we also helped a lot of much smaller clients, but that are trying to do a difference, make a difference in that world, whether it's from their point of view or the product itself, or what they're trying to do in an industry. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's probably a bit more obvious right now. We are a branding company, not a product one. And I think there's loads of things to say about that. But one thing that is so interesting in working in a branding company is that 360 approach. We do a lot of things from strategy, messaging, the visual identity itself. We do a lot of work on naming, and we also help obviously clients with products, website, film, photography. So this is probably a proper 360/global approach, and it's amazing because we can really help brands from day one until they want to move on and do something else. But we can literally do everything, and we create great relationship with them as well. And I think this is also about obviously building trust that we are in this together. And so as a branding consultant and a branding agency, we got quite lucky to work with that diversity of clients I've mentioned. And so we have branded startups from scratch. It's all about thinking about the future and defining a vision for them, and sometimes actually giving them a name and an identity, thinking about the product and so on. And we've done that really well with Huma. I don't know if you know them. They were previously called Metapad. And Huma is a remote patient mentoring system. And so this is quite obviously interesting. They're trying to do a lot of goods in that world. And you can obviously see with that, really beautiful overview that the brand is built on that sort of, bold mission to create a world where, everyone is healthy and they can live a long life. What's interesting about also the naming approach of this is that the naming sort of reflects this human-centered approach. And what's great about Huma is there is the strategy, there is the name, the identity, but there's also a lot of work that we have done on the product and other things to define, a brand that will be able to talk on all the different touch points that they need to. But on the other side of the scale, we also help other brands to launch product and services. The biggest brands in the world that have something really strong already, but they just need help, to go to the next level. And prior to founding Koto, some of us have actually rebranded Airbnb back in 2012, 2013. And we have still an amazing relationship with them that gave us a lot of opportunities to work on different product or services that they are launching. We're still very close to Brian Chesky, the CEO, and other people from their team. And so, for example, working on the experience/trips, defining the visuals, defining where they're going to live, defining the style and the system around it are the things that we are doing with Airbnb. We've also done a lot more with them. We have defined Airbnb Plus, which is the slightly more high-end tier of their offer. And it was about creating the logo and figuring out how this other alternative color palette would work with the master brand. It was about defining the tone of voice, the photography style, and everything together. We do a lot more work with Airbnb, and we don't need to dwell too much on this, but we have helped them on Open, for example, and beyond, which is even the tier higher than Plus. And so that's the great thing with branding, and what we do is we can sort of flex from, helping these big brands, go to the next level and figure out what they want to do next, but also, the Huma of this world that are trying to really, make an impact for the first time. And each free brand has the same challenge, more or less. And the big challenge is, how do we bridge the gap between brand and product? And this is what I want to talk about today, because the brand that we're going to try to create for a client needs to have, a good personality on the product and need to be reflected, across all the different parts of the business. And product is one of them, but there's also obviously packaging if needed. There's website, there's campaigns and other stuff. And put a bit more simply, the question and the challenge is, how do we make sure that the brand, translate well in the product? And there's so many ways, and people will tell you a lot of different things. But I think there are 4 really big themes that we have to make sure they are answered correctly. We have to know the product first. This is about, this is the same process for everything. We have to know what we are talking about. We have to know the industry to sit in. We have to understand what are the competitors, and we need to have that understanding, so everything that we make in terms of decision making is based on facts and not emotion. And we're going to talk about that in a second. It's also about embracing collaboration. It's very important that we work really closely as a team. As brand experts, we do a lot of things, but we're going to work with people that do one thing really, really well. So it's very important to keep our mind very open about that. Super important to understand the intent. What are we trying to do here? Are we trying to solve something? Are we trying to make a difference here? Are we trying to disrupt something else? Very important, because it's going to have a big impact on the process. And then the last thing is to be ready to make sacrifices. When we create a brand, there's loads and loads of things that can be used really nicely, but not everything can be used on the product. So this is important, once again, that we have an open-minded and we know the decisions that we are making. We're going to talk about one project in general today called Huma. This is something that we have just finished, and that involved a lot of work on the product, website as well, and a lot of more things. You're going to see that in a second, but it was a really long project, and trying to figure out what was the best approach to apply that brand to the product. If you don't know what Huma is, this is a new kind of social media, which is really interesting. It's a video live streaming app for teenagers from 12 to 25. So you're now not allowed to get in if you're 26, 27, and so on. And it's a really interesting and new approach to social media. There's no likes, no follows. They probably got rid of all the toxic, sort of features that made, we see Instagram and these, big social media quite popular. And so it's all about finding a place to hang out and meet a lot of nice people that share probably the same interest as you do. And to sum it up, there's a lot more to be said about it, but the brand that we have created was really a celebration of all the interaction that are constantly happening in the app. There's loads and loads of things happening. We have looked at it for a while as well with the Huma team, and it goes really quick. There's loads of things happening. People chat about that and move on to something else, and they'll watch a show together, and they'll do a game together, and then move on to do something else. So it was about celebrating that sort of randomness, that control chaos that is happening when you're a teenager, and you can see that throughout the brand. This is a brand that is embracing that youthness, if I may, something that is colorful, something that is dynamic, something that never really stands still. So we take this and we're like, okay, how are we gonna bring that into the product so it's also both functional but also quite inspiring? So how do we bridge that gap from this beautiful campaign that we have done globally? We've done it in New York, San Francisco, LA, and so on, to the product. It's much smaller, that's going to sit in your pocket, and that will have, obviously, in a way, a lot of expressiveness, but it needs to be functional. Right, so we're going to go through these 4 things I have mentioned. So know the product. So might sound obvious, but it's not. A deep understanding of the product is extremely important. We need to have a reason behind everything that we make. It needs to feel purposeful. It needs to be pragmatic. I think we have to leave the emotion out of these decisions. It's important that the brand feels emotional. There's a lot of emotion through it, but the decisions that we make They need to be a bit more functional. We need to understand why we're doing this. And so it's all about obviously understanding the product. It's about testing the product. It's about figuring out, the things that work and the things that don't work. It's also about looking at all the research that Yubo had made in the past. What are the things that make them unique? What are the things that are meaningful to the community? Because you might not know Yubo, but they're actually massive. They probably at the time had 60 million users, and they probably have doubled in size. And so for a brand that was only created, 4 years ago, for example, like that, if I remember, this is quite a big gap. And so trying to really understand what makes that product unique, and also actually doing a lot of interviews as well, trying to figure out the things that people want to retain and the thing they want to improve is very important. We'll also go through a very deep and thorough competitor research, and this is something that we'll also do on the normal brand process. But the intent of that exercise is to understand where that brand is going to sit in and what are the opportunities. And in that case, obviously, we're looking at a lot of big players. We're looking at Snapchat, Instagram, the TikTok and House Party of this world. But it's interesting when you look at all of them all together, if I go back, there's not a lot of distinctiveness. And I think that there are things that we need to keep, because these are based on deep and strong user research. And this is what have made the difference and what have made these brands so unique. But there are opportunities to be a bit different. So when we just see a screen from Yubo, we know this is them. And so from that research that lasted a good few weeks, we defined key areas of opportunity. There were 6, from live, profile, main section, sign up, and so on. And this is at that point where that process involved a lot of back and forth with Yubo. And I think this is important to say it, because there are things we think are important to change and things we think will make a difference, but actually they're probably not the same thing that the clients are thinking, because the client know the product so well and we don't yet. And so it's very important to keep your mind open and to really embrace collaboration, as I'm going to talk about it, because this is something that we do on a daily basis. We'll never know the business more than the people that work within. And this is very important to keep that in mind, because it's really going to have a big sort of impact on how we approach the project, right? And this is a big fundamental mindset to have. It's going to change everything from how we interact with the team and how open-minded we are to feedback, and how willing we are to push back on this or to be okay with that. So we have to understand that we'll never know the business more than they do. And at Koto, this is a thing that is so important to us from the start. We always try to make sure that we start every project with that beginner's mindset. And I think this is super important, because it obviously helps us, always come with fresh thinking and new sort of options and new ideas on the table, but it's also going to make that experience much smoother as expected. So this is the first round of creative on that product. It was all about bringing the findings of obviously that research, but also the things that make our brand so unique. This idea that it never stands still, the use of the yellow, like a lot of the rest of the graphic language. And we're thinking, right, we can have highlight sections just to break the monotony of the chat. We can have type on a path, or add stickers into the typeface. We can build a bit more equity in the yellow if you look at that third product. And then that fourth one, can we have bespoke backgrounds, for example, like a good opportunity on that profile page to be a bit more branded. And it's true, they look good. We're really happy about it. And you would show that to anyone who would probably say, yeah, this is nice. But the question is, are they right? And they were not that right. Because this one doesn't really translate well in light mode. Using that yellow on that dark works pretty well, but if you do it on white, it wouldn't. You have to think about all the languages, and so thinking also about the size of Yubo at the time, they only have a team in New York and Paris, and so if you're looking at, for example, Chinese or Japanese or other languages that they don't know about, where do you put the sticker? How do you do that type on a path? So a lot of things about scalability that are not possible right now. Using yellow in the chat seems like a normal and good idea to build the equity in that yellow. They felt maybe a bit too unconventional for the team, and it's not because it looks good and it makes sense that it's right for the client. And so it's all about obviously keeping your mind open about that. And then we can't create 40 million unique backgrounds for each user, not now, probably not never, but as much as it's a good idea and we could probably use the same background all the time, I think this idea of maybe having something that felt truly you and always changing is probably a bit complicated. And obviously very important to understand these challenges, right? Like I said, the cost implication, the size of the team, where they're located, how much impact they want to make. These are questions and challenges that are as important as the work itself. This is very important. Like you have seen, it's not about how good it looks, it's more about how right it feels. And it's really about understanding your ego and probably leaving your ego at the door at that time, because this is not about you. This is about your client, and this is about what feels right for them. The third thing I want to talk about is also the intent. And I think this is quite important here, because I think probably a mistake that some people make when they do that bridge between the brand and the product. But the goal isn't to express the brand fully everywhere at its maximum, level, but it's about finding the right moments for it, where it's going to feel very purposeful and where it's going to feel right. And this is something that we'll try obviously to make, to push and to really understand, and we push ourselves to make that happen. Because for us, loud moments will make you smile, and functional moments will make you think. And this is actually quite a nice sort of metaphor, because it pushes you to think twice on the functional moments. How can we find a ways to make the most recessive and functional moments as enjoyable as the large one? And I think we need to push ourselves to make that happen as well, because if we don't do that, we have a risk of feeling a bit disconnected between the big moments and the functional moments. And so this is exactly what happened on Yubo. There are moments like on the left-hand side where we're big and we're branded and we're bold and there's loads of colors and it's all about 100% expression of the brand. And there are other moments, the slightly more functional ones, where we need to step back a bit and find other ways to bring that brand into life. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But for example, how do we reuse color? How do we bring a digital palette into life? How do we bring iconography and so on? So yes, these branded moments, they're great. And they're bold and they're big and they feel definitely branded, but it's also about finding the time to breathe, because not everything can be like this, because it could be a bit overwhelming. And it's all about also thinking about the slightly more functional moments, where it's all about the function. It's all about displaying information clearly. It's all about using color in a smart way, so we put emphasis on important information. How do we do that through the icons? How do we do that through the photography? I think this is what makes a product so successful, is that beautiful harmony between those two together. So that question again, how do we make the most recessive parts of the product compelling? On Yubo, there's obviously more than that. Obviously, the three things that we have dealt with are color. How do we bring a bit more equity in that yellow and we use it in moments that really matter? And how do we build a color palette that will be able to flex to talk about the different sides of that product? How do we use illustration / sticker in that instance to make the most recessive part of the product feel a teeny tiny bit more interesting? And how do we bring iconography into the page so everything feels a bit more branded, even when we have nothing else than a photo? And obviously, we only have a limited amount of time today, but iconography is always a good way to do it. Thinking about how they're going to appear in the small moments of that brand, and how we're going to be able to use colors, for example, and how close we want them to be to the rest of the brand. And in that instance, the logo are the small little things that will make the product experience much better. Like I said, the big moments, the loud and big moments will make you smile, and the small moments will make you think. And this is how we can just bridge that gap really carefully, but efficiently. Then the last thing before we wrap up is be ready to make sacrifices, right? Because it's the same with the intent, but I think something that brand designers, but also other even product designers in a way have to understand is not all the elements of the brand will live in the product, and that's completely fine. because there are things that we actually create in the product that will never be used in the brand. There are things in the brand that will work amazingly well on social, or they'll work amazingly well on the campaign or the website, but they'll probably won't work in the product, and that's fine, because it's also about understanding, the diversity of this brand, and where things are going to work and where things are not going to work. And so in the instance of Yubo, it was a celebration of the randomness and the dynamism of the teenagers. So there's loads of things. There are stickers and colors and speech bubbles and different typefaces and that character called a bow. Loads of things, right? And you just have to be okay that not everything is gonna work. And part of the graphic language of Yubo, it is built on a lot of a speech bubble that represent conversations, thoughts, interest. And the reason why we did it is to emphasize individuals' mindset and the conversations that they have. And so we had one typeface for conversation with one style of bubble. We had the same with interest, and we had the same with thoughts. And it looks great in the brand. And if you go on Yubo right now in that website, this is live. You'll see this, and we have obviously a beautiful photography style, behind it. But they're great to represent all the different things that they are talking about. But the thing to understand is at the stage of Yubo's growth, which they were a bit smaller than they are today, adding all the three bubbles on the product was quite a lot. It would require a big team, a lot of time, more money, trying to think about also how we translate that in all the different languages that they have. Imagine all the countries they're in right now, which is hundreds of countries. This is quite a lot. And so we actually made the sacrifice as a team ourselves, but with them as well, to only keep the interest for the time being, because it's fine, right? This is a process. This is also something that will, evolve, with time, and when they're growing, or if it feels right also in the product. And it might not feel right in the product, but this is something that we're going to do as a team. It was also about taking all of that good stuff and simplifying it to, a minimal sort of form, making sure that everything had the same hex height, making sure that any kind of words will also fit into these interest bubbles, all of that nice stuff. And so you have to be ready to make sacrifices, and you also have to be ready to make changes to make sure that this experience, the product experience, is also as good as any other kind of experience. Because at the end of the day, this is where these are going to live. You'll have your profile, and you put all the interests that you have based on movies, sports, brands, and so on. So this is it, and you have to be ready to do this. And so to finish up, this process is a collaboration. This is something I've tried to emphasize a bit today. And you have to start from day one, because the more trusted you are and the more trust you have in your clients, and that sort of mutual trust, the more open-minded you're going to be with to feedback, and it's going to be the same with them, and you're going to understand things that you're not supposed to understand if you don't do that work. And so hopefully that gap between the brand and the product was bridged quite neatly with Yubo, and we have created something that feels truly on brand and definitely consistent across the board. So yes, this is it, and I've done it on time, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we have about 6 minutes for questions.
Yeah, it almost neat perfect.
Yeah.
So
I'll stop sharing, but I can share again, but in case anyone wants to see my face.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation. The slides were quite cheerful and beautiful. I wanted to ask maybe to share more your experience about how the collaboration with the product team was set.
Yeah. So something that we do at Koto is, so first of all, every project we create a Slack channel where we have our team and their team all together. And the way we have done it for Yubo, and it really changes and differ with clients, is we had daily catch up with their team, where in some instances their team are doing the project and we're doing something on our side, and we're actually catching up at the end of the day, and we make some observations, opportunities, and even a plan for the next day. But in that instance, they had so much trust in the work that we had done ourselves on the brand, and we had incredible relationship with the founders as well that were actually involved in this, that we were pushing the brands for maybe 1 or 2 days and then catching up all together on Figma, and then just get everyone involved to share feedback. And it was an amazing opportunity also to learn things that you can't learn from user research, and you can't learn from just looking at the product, little things that they will tell you about the future of Yubo and the things that they want to do. So insanely collaborative, I would say. This is something we always try to do. It sounds a bit cliche and cheesy, but we really try to work as one team and not two different teams.
That really sounds very important, especially when you're not an in-house team that works on the product. That's even more difficult, I think. The second thing that was interesting is about the sacrifices that you made, and whether those sacrifices made a bad impact on the team's motivation.
Not on us, I think, because we've done so much research and we have done so much brands like this and so much product that we know you'll have to do that eventually. And like I said, at some point, it's about leaving your ego at the door. It's not about what you want. It's about what feels right for Yubo. And so, for example, in that instance, the whole app is built on interest. So you get on the app. If you're young enough, I'm not, but we know how it works, unfortunately. But you get on the app, and the first thing that you do, you put all the interest you have in life, and they have tens of thousands of interest from brands, movies, travel, languages, etc. And so these are at the core of the brand from literally the first or the second screen, literally. And so it felt like if we need to have one, this is going to be this one. And a speech bubble and all of the rest, if you look at the social, for example, of Yubo, they are using that brand so well, and they're literally everywhere, and they're on the website. And we've done a massive campaign as well, like I said, around London and New York, etc. And they were everywhere. And so it's fine that they're probably not going to be on the product right now because they definitely feel connected. And so the things that you see on social and you don't see in the product, or the other way around, it's fine, because it's all about the global brand. And that you don't need to have everything all the time at one place, because it's going to be a bit overwhelming. In the future, we hope that they'll be able to have maybe a bit more like speech bubble, and people will be able to, click on one if they're like, they want to express something like, oh yeah, great, or, what's up, or something like that. But they need time, and they need to figure out how they're going to do it with different languages, for example, and other things like that. But this is definitely in the pipeline.
And also, I think the last question is, do you track as a team how your branding and the work that you've done impacts the product? For example, after this massive campaign, did you have a meeting where the team represented the results? Because the whole work was done to gain some business goals, right?
Yes, we were not obsessed about it, but we had some stats for Yubo. The good thing about Yubo is we've started last September, and we still work with them on a retainer basis. So we do lots of things for them, internal things, external PDFs, and so on. And so they said after that campaign, for example, they have in average 300% more visits on the website than normal. So on daily basis, which is quite amazing. So this is probably the stats that we have that is truly incredible from this. But we're not obsessed about that. If we got the stat, this is amazing. But yeah, we're not hunting for it.
But still, it's quite interesting, and maybe showing the portfolio to future other teams that will work with you.
It is great. Like when we rebranded Back Market, for example, that is a refurbished sort of like marketplace, and they started really, really small, and we worked really closely with the founders, and then like 6 to 7 months later, they announced a 300 million investment, and you're like, wow, we think that we have a big part of it. We're doing a big part of this, from the work that we have done, and sometimes we actually help our clients with investor deck, for example. We've done that for Yubo, and we've done that with a lot of different brands. I think, yeah, we're quite proud of it, because at the end of the day, it's about them, right? It's not about us, really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, so the timing is up. Thank you very much, Arthur. That was a very engaging presentation. I loved it.
Thank you so much.